I always thought I was the problem. No matter how hard I tried, I was never enough. And one question stayed in my mind. Why was I always less? My name is Emma. I'm Year Mialta, and I work in a small marketing team. People often say I'm quiet. They say I don't speak up enough. I used to agree with them. I told myself, maybe I'm just not good at this. At work, I did everything I could. I made an effort. I stayed late. I tried to build something from nothing. But somehow, my ideas were always overlooked. When I spoke, the room went silent. Or worse, someone would shut me down. So I started to hold back. I didn't want to look foolish again. Deep inside, I began to lose confidence. I kept asking myself, why was I always the one who got ignored? I said nothing and kept my head down. For a long time, I believed that silence was safer, that if I didn't speak, I couldn't fail. But I didn't know. Staying quiet was slowly taking away my voice. And then one day, everything changed. That was the day someone took my idea. And for the first time in my life, I didn't stay silent. When I was a child, my sister Olivia was always the best. She got higher grades, and people listened when she spoke. At home, everything felt clear. She was the one who made my parents proud. I was just there. I can still hear my mother's voice. Why can't you be like Olivia? That question followed me everywhere. I tried to change. I made an effort. I studied longer. I stayed up late to improve. But no matter how hard I tried, I always came second. At dinner, they talked about her success. I sat quietly, holding my thoughts back. It felt easier that way. School was not very different. I had ideas. Simple ideas, but good ones. Every time I spoke, the teacher would shut me down. That's not clear, they said. I nodded and sat down. But later, someone else would say the same thing. And suddenly, it became a great idea. People smiled. They agreed. I just watched. That moment stayed in my mind. I didn't understand what I was doing wrong. Deep inside, something started to change. I began to lose confidence. I started to feel invisible, like my voice didn't matter. So I stopped trying to speak. I told myself it was safer this way. I stayed silent and let the moment pass. And slowly, I ended up believing it. Maybe I really was not enough. At work, things were not very different. My boss asked for new ideas during a team meeting. I raised my hand slowly. My voice was low, but I tried. I think we can try a new campaign, I said. He didn't even look at me. That's too simple, he replied. The room moved on. I sat down and went quiet. My idea was shut down again. A few days later, something small changed. My boss gave me a task. Just try this, he said. It wasn't a big project, but it was a chance. I held on to it. Maybe this time would be different. Maybe I could prove a point. I told myself to keep going. That night, I stayed late at the office. The lights were dim. I was working on a new idea, writing notes and building it step by step. Daniel sat next to me. He leaned over and asked, "What are you working on?" I paused for a second. Then I turned my screen and showed him. I thought maybe he could help. He looked at it and smiled a little. "You think too much," he said. "It's not very strong." His words were soft, but they stayed with me. I felt small again. "Oh, okay," I said quietly. I closed my notebook for a moment, trying to hold back my thoughts. The next day, we had another meeting. I sat in the same chair, not expecting anything. Then Daniel stood up. He started to present. I froze. The slides on the screen looked familiar. Too familiar. It was my idea. The same structure. The same message. People nodded. Some smiled. "That's a great idea," someone said. My throat felt dry, and my fingers froze under the table. I stayed still and watched everything happen. After the meeting, I stayed at my desk. I opened my notebook. Same words, same idea, but not my voice. That moment stayed in my mind. I had seen this before. I had lived this before. That night, I opened my laptop again. I looked at my notes, line by line. This time, I didn't close it. I didn't walk away. Something inside me was starting to change. A week later, the company announced a big contest. The winner would get a promotion. Everyone was excited. This was a major opportunity. I told myself I had to try again. This time, I worked alone. I didn't share my ideas. I stayed late every night, building everything step by step. I wanted to prove a point. I wanted to be seen. The final meeting came. My heart was beating fast as I walked into the room. I sat down quietly, holding my laptop close. Then Daniel stood up. He started presenting. At first, I didn't understand, but then I saw the slides. My idea, my structure, my words. A heavy pressure built in my chest. People started nodding. Some leaned forward with interest. "That's a great idea," someone said. I heard light clapping. Then my boss looked at Daniel and said, "This could change our company." Something inside me dropped. I looked at the screen again. My eyes moved quickly, and then I saw it. The file name. The same version I had sent before. I could still remember that email. I had shared it days ago, but no one replied. No one said anything. Now it was here, on the screen, without my name. My fingers trembled without control. Everything around me suddenly felt too close. I couldn't hear clearly for a moment. My breath slowed down, then rushed back. I sat there, frozen. Then I looked at my laptop. All my drafts were there. Every note, every step, everything I built from nothing. I took a deep breath, and slowly, I stood up. For a second, no one noticed. Then a few heads turned. I told myself, "Don't sit down again." But one question stayed in my mind. What would happen if I finally spoke? My hands were shaking, but I stayed where I was. No one made a sound. I could hear my own breath. For a second, I almost stepped back. I almost sat down again, but I didn't. "Can I ask a question?" I said. My voice was not loud, but it didn't break. A few people turned to look at me. Daniel paused. He looked surprised. I asked him about the details. Small things, deep things, the kind only the person who built the idea would know. He hesitated. I think it's clear," he said quickly. "It's not," I replied. The room went still. I opened my laptop. My fingers moved fast, but they were not weak. File after file appeared on the screen. Drafts, notes, early versions. Every step I had worked on. "This is my work," I said. My breath felt stuck, but I kept going. Every time I spoke, no one listened. I looked around the room. No one moved. No one interrupted. But when someone else said the same thing, it became a great idea. My eyes burned. Tears filled them. But I kept my eyes forward this time. I stopped holding back. "I am not less," I said slowly. I was just never heard. Silence. No one clapped. No one spoke. Even Daniel looked down. For a moment, everything stopped. And then, for the first time in my life, people were looking at me. Daniel tried to speak, but his voice was no longer strong. "I didn't mean to," he said, but the words didn't go far. He looked at the screen, then at the table. He couldn't continue. My boss leaned back in his chair. He looked at Daniel first, then slowly turned to me. "Is this true?" he asked. No one moved. Daniel stayed silent. His hands were on the table, but they didn't stop shaking. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. There was nothing he could say. My boss let out a long breath. "This is serious," he said quietly. No one argued. No one tried to change the story. The truth was already there, clear and heavy. No one moved or spoke. I could hear the soft sound of the air conditioner. Someone shifted in their seat, but no one spoke. I stood there, holding my laptop. My arms felt tired, but I didn't lower them yet. Then slowly, I closed it. For a moment, I just stood in the cold. And for once, I was not invisible anymore. That night, I went home. The house was quiet, but I could hear my parents talking in the living room. I stepped inside slowly. They were already discussing Olivia. "She needs help," my mother said. "We already told Olivia you would help." A sharp weight pressed in my chest again. "You don't need it anyway," my father added. I stood there for a moment. The same pattern, the same words. It felt so familiar, like I had lived this moment many times before. But this time, something was different. "No," I said. My voice was not loud, but it didn't disappear. They both turned to look at me. Surprise filled their faces. I always gave up my chances. I continued. My hands were shaking, but I didn't stop. I always stayed quiet. I took a small step forward. "I have dreams too," I said. "I worked hard too." My mother's eyes moved away. She looked down, avoiding my face. My father stayed silent. He didn't say anything. The silence grew heavier between us. No one tried to interrupt. "You never asked," I added softly. The words stayed in the air. No one replied. But this silence felt different. I stood there, breathing slowly. My heart was still racing, but I didn't step back this time. And for the first time, I was not afraid of speaking anymore. A few months later, things slowly changed. At work, I got a new role. It wasn't easy at first, but it was a fresh start. People began to listen more. Not every time, but enough for me to feel the difference. I didn't hold back as much as before. One day, my manager asked me to present my idea again. This time, it was my voice in the room. I stood in front of the team, holding my notes, but I didn't look down. I spoke clearly, step by step. When I finished, there was a short silence. Then someone nodded. A colleague looked at me and said, "Why didn't you speak sooner?" I paused for a second. I didn't answer, but deep inside, I knew why. At home, things were still slow. My parents didn't change overnight, but they tried in small ways. Sometimes they asked instead of deciding. Sometimes they listened before speaking. And I changed too. I spoke more, even when my voice felt small. I shared my thoughts, even when I was not sure. I didn't give up my space so easily anymore. At that moment, something inside me finally felt different. I didn't feel like second best. I felt enough. You are not less. You were just never given the space to be seen. Sometimes, the world stays quiet not because you are wrong, but because no one truly listens. And when you finally speak up, even with a small voice, everything begins to change. Not only how others see you, but how you see yourself. In real life, you may feel like Emma sometimes. You make an effort, but no one seems to notice. You share ideas, but they get shut down or ignored. After a while, you may start to hold back. You may believe staying quiet is safer, but silence does not protect you. It slowly makes you feel invisible. When you are always quiet, people may take you for granted. That does not mean you are weak. It only means you have been silent for too long. Your value does not come from how others react. It comes from what you bring. Even one small step can change something. Speak one idea. Stand up once. Say no when it matters. You do not have to be loud. You just have to be heard. People around you may not change right away, but when you change, the way they see you can begin to shift. At the same time, this story is not only about one person. It is also about the people around her. Families may believe they are being fair, but they are not. When they compare one child to another, it does not build strength. It creates doubt. When someone is always quiet, it does not mean they are okay. It may mean they are carrying pain inside. Real care starts with listening, not assuming, not deciding for someone else. Asking simple questions can change everything. Listening before judging shows respect. Noticing effort, not just results, helps people feel seen. If someone always gives in, it may look like peace, but it can be the start of losing themselves. And when they finally speak, it may be after a long time of silence. In the end, change happens from both sides. One person learns to speak up. Another learns to listen. That is where healing begins. Have you ever felt invisible, like your voice didn't matter? If this story felt close to you, take a moment and share it. Comment, "I am enough," to remind yourself that your voice has value. And if you want more stories like this, don't forget to like and subscribe. Your voice matters more than you think. See you in the next story.